for this group and this community that we get to learn together. I pray that we would be focused on learning more about you, and that our aim would just be to love you and others better than we do all this knowledge that we're using, not to puff ourselves up, God. I pray that you would keep us focused and open our hearts to what you have to teach us. And thank you. That was the song I was trying to think of.
I'm not sure what just happened exactly, but yes, Ty.
Good Father, please.
You guys, all of y'all hate Good Father for some reason. Why? I like Good Father. No, the one I know it's by Tomlin, but I like that one.
It's too much for a short period of time.
You literally love biblical studies, and you like Good Father.
Yeah, it's good.
The whole line, the whole song.
No, it's got lyrics in
I saw
it.
somebody do it at their father-daughter dance.
That's weird.
What?
That's weird. Yeah, that's weird.
No.
That's pretty weird. Yeah. Should we sing "Sinking Deep" for you two's sake? That's your favorite song. Y'all love that song.
I do love that song.
Yes, you do. You both love that one. I feel like I get that every time. We're lean back, or sinking deep. We're gonna get that every time with Ty or Isaiah.
Students. It connects them.
Hey, I follow you, man. I follow your lead.
Where you going?
I don't know anything about it. Y'all do me this favor. Is there any lingering? What week did y'all do last week? Roland said y'all are behind. Is what he said.
We did session 1 last week. Finished session 1.
How many weeks are you supposed to have been through?
We're supposed to be on session 3 right now. We're on session 4.
Okay. We're going to be on session 4. That's what Roland told me to do. And he said he actually called me and said, I'll do 3 later. You go and do 4. Yeah, forget that whole thing about God. And we'll move on to session 4. Any lingering, talk about us.
What is wrong with the world?
Any lingering just problems or question marks about how this is working or things from Roland in the last couple of weeks?
We talked a lot about like the scripture, and I guess like a lingering question, which isn't really great for answering this minute, but something I'm chewing on is like, how can we prove the scripture without just using scripture?
Right.
I don't know. That's just weird. Is it like something that you just accept once you come to know God, and like He gives you peace about it, or
does that bother anyone else?
I know what he's getting at.
Huh? You know what he's getting at? Yeah. Okay. Does it bother you, but you get it? You know what I'm saying? Okay. Just in a short, just real briefly, when we get to the level of worldview assumptions, like drilling way down to worldview assumptions, all worldview assumptions ultimately become circular reasoning, all of them. So a Christian, yes, is using circular reasoning when we say, I think the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true and I trust the character of God. Yeah. Well, if I'm a skeptical person, I'd go, well, that's circular logic. The same thing is true, though, for somebody to say, I believe that there is no God in the equation and all we are evolved primates. Okay, well, prove to me that in a way beyond just, well, I've observed that in the data or something like that. Everybody, when you get down to the level of worldview, is using circular logic. And so I do not allow supernatural explanations for things. That'd be an atheist worldview assumption. Why do you not allow it? Because I don't allow it. At some point, it's just circular. You can't prove your worldview assumptions empirically. And so whenever I'm talking to a skeptical person, so you're not necessarily a skeptical person, but I'm talking to a lost person out there, and they bring that up to me, that's circular. I try to point that out to them and then try to help them to see just because something is circular doesn't make it untrue. Yeah. And so let's now talk about what is the Bible discussing? What's the story it's trying to tell? So don't fall victim to that. Don't feel like, oh, he got us or she got us on that one, because everybody's doing that when you get to the level of worldview. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. For the Christian, which y'all are, I believe that this is God's inspired word. I can't empirically prove that those 66 books are God's word, but First Maccabees isn't. I can't empirically prove that. How would I? As a matter of assumption or faith commitment, I hold that to be true. Just like an atheist holds that there is no supernatural explanation. Okay. Make sense?
Yeah.
Make you feel better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Lingering? Today's going to be fun. Eileen's going to love today. Love today.
What's wrong with the world and me?
It's Eileen's favorite thing. Yeah. No, creation.
Oh.
Yeah. Look at the next bullet down. Just read a little farther there, Eileen. Come on. All right. Let's dive in. What we're going to do today is we are going to ask that question: what's wrong with the world and with me? And one of the things that's tricky about doing what we're doing here, which is called systematic theology. Okay, systematic theology is where you try to categorize all of the Bible and summarize it into some bullet points or some questions and answers like this. Is when you do that, you're somewhat asking an arbitrary question that the text may not be trying to answer itself or answer it in that way. So when we say, how did the universe come to be? Well, that's a question we have that potentially an ancient person isn't even interested in. How did the material origin of the universe come to be? And so we're going to do that because we're in a systematic theology class called Our Faith. I actually love Our Faith. Roland wrote this one, and I love this one because it's got a handful of verses that we talk about with some bullets, and then it's a lot of space to discuss. And so let's do that today. What we're going to do is we're going to start. There's no page numbers. Oh yeah, page 36 is the beginning of session 4. What's wrong with the world and with me? And I want you to note the bolded and italic thing right under this. Your view of the problem will determine your view of the solution. Okay, so just note that. Just put that in the back of your mind because we actually see that in a lot of the response to the story of the Bible from our secular skeptical friends outside the church. I'll say it this way: if humanity is essentially good, and there's some evil people out there, we always say Hitler. Hitler and Stalin, and then like Bin Laden's pretty bad. If you're a Republican, the Democrats are bad. Pelosi, and if you're a Democrat, then you hate the Republicans. So, but we all kind of have our list of the really evil people, and then we're all good. We're mostly good. Then when you come to the story of Jesus being crucified, it looks out of place. It almost looks like a way overreaction on God's part. Why the cross? That's going to be next week. And so we want to build to that question, why the cross? And we're Protestant evangelicals who go to fellowship. And so we have a high view of the cross because we have a high view of the problem. I would think we would all agree that there's something broken in us that merits the cross. But that doesn't compute to the average person out there. Now, let me give you a reason why I'm chasing this down. It used to be, and I'm not being mean here, I promise. It used to be that you could walk up to an average person, especially in America, especially in the South, and draw this, and people had an understanding, right? And you say, for the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God, blah, blah, blah. People had a basic framework that God is really good, we're really screwed up, and we deserve this abyss down there, right? Death. The wages of sin is death. This story people largely don't agree with now. Mostly. If they're from the South, they might. And so this might actually work with that person. But if you're dealing with and I'm assuming because y'all are younger than me, you're hearing more and more and more, this story doesn't, people hear this and are like, that's not what I think. I think people are good. We're all good, right? There's the bad evil people, but we're all good. Especially in our kind of progressive culture that we live in right now. The only thing evil is telling somebody they're not good, or telling somebody that their way of thinking is wrong or off. That's the evil. We're all good if we just get to be who we want to be, live our truth and all that. And anybody that says otherwise, that's the evil. So then where does the cross fit in that story? It's out of place. So we have to recapture what is wrong with the world and me, because your view of the problem will determine your view of the solution. Okay? Tracking with me? Where we're at, where we're starting this, why this matters? Okay. Now let's look at the world. And then with me, I want you to box on page 36 and 37. Box the word creation there under Roman numeral 2. Then angels, below that, all caps angels. Then over on page 37, humans. We've got the universe, we might call them the angelic beings, the immaterial beings, and the material beings. So we're going to look at these 2 pages are going to get us situated on the created world. Now, we could spend a lot of time on this creation one. Yeah. But my assumption is, here's how I want to do this. you all took Panorama. You took it with Nick. He walked you through Prologue, which is?
Creation, fall, flood, tower.
Then Patriarchs is?
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph.
Then the third is a double movement, if you will, called?
Redemption and Wonder.
And it begins with? I knew it. See, nobody can get past that. The Israelites begin in a place of bondage, and then we had. Okay, so that's all. There's thousands of people that know creation, fall, flood, tower, and Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and everybody goes.
And they
What's the
never
third one?
made it past.
They never make it past the first notch of redemption and wandering, which is bondage, by the way. So.
No one wants to talk about that.
Y'all don't want to go back at that. So I'll go by the rear view. My assumption is y'all spent time talking about the creation views in Panorama. He probably laid out multiple views for you, day-age theory and cosmic temple and historical creation. Does this ring a bell?
Yeah.
Now here's what I'd like to do. Normally when I teach our faith, this one little notch ends up taking about 15 or 20 minutes of the full hour. If you extrapolate those percentages, it'd be like 40 minutes of our 2 hours. I would like to just simply ask this. What lingering questions do you have from your time in Panorama about, you would have had time to think about it. Some of you went, I don't care. And you never thought about it. Some of you, it might have started a bit of a study for you. Okay, what do I think about how the world came to be? I'm assuming that Roland made fun of me and said, oh, Garland changes his mind every 2 years or something like that. I'm also assuming Roland did not hint at where he lands because he's a gutless wonder, and I hope he watches this. He's spineless. So what do y'all want to talk about? No, he knows I love it. What do you want to talk about with creation? We can look at the views again and just summarize them real fast, or we can blow past this one and make a simple observation that God created all that exists and made it good. Okay, are we still doing our ratio with Cody? Is our ratio still on? Is it gone up? Okay, yeah. Just making sure, because you should have seen Cody, the look in Cody's eyes when I said, what do y'all want to talk about? He was beaming back there, like, oh, I'm ready to go. So we've got the ratio still for Cody. All right, what was your question? Then we'll come to Cody, because I know he's got one.
Well, I think that it was more like I would like to go over the theories a little bit.
Okay.
Because it just makes me really uneasy that there's that many theories and that it's that across the board. So many different thoughts and ways people think creation has started. And I just yeah.
Okay.
That's
Would that be helpful for more people, or should we set up a coffee?
I'm okay with coffee too. I agree with you.
So just we'll do let's do a flyby. Let's do a quick review, and then we can chat, and then you can see what I think. So there are different ways to kind of conceptualize this. One is we're going to say that God is working directly to create, and I don't like that language. Let's just do it the old-fashioned way. Probably most of you grew up thinking that Genesis 1, particularly, the 7 days, is describing 7 literal days of the earth coming to be out of nothing, right? That's the young earth view. So I want to talk about it, you are familiar with it. You started the clock on day 1, and the earth is relatively young, right? Now, what's the problem? What's your issue with that? As a
Science.
Okay, so
Numbers don't match up.
Yeah.
Take that one.
okay, what do you mean by that?
Just with what science is saying.
Okay.
I say numbers because mathematically there's science and the math behind it. If
You're a
you take
math
that-
person, yeah.
It just doesn't compute
Okay.
for me in my brain.
So this view creates what seems to be, and by the way, we're going to call this modern science, because science is just observing the world around us, really, and making observations about it. Modern science versus what we might call biblical faith here, that puts a lot of tension between this, the young earth view. Fair?
Yeah.
Y'all feel a lot of tension.
Right.
Everybody does, seems to. Now, here's the problem, and I want to be fair. I'm not a young earther, and almost all of you know that. But it's not because, well, I felt this tension, and I wanted to alleviate it, so I just said, well, I'll punt this. Okay? We don't do that. There's a lot of tension right now between the LGBTQ view of reality and sexuality and ours. And just because something is off-putting or difficult or creates tension doesn't mean we bail on it. We may have to wrestle through it and maybe have to learn how to say it differently, but doesn't mean we bail on it. So that's not the reason. A lot of scholars, Old Testament scholars, have come along and said, is this what the Bible really is affirming in Genesis chapter 1? Some have come and said, okay, the universe seems to be old, billions of years old, and have these, we might say, these stages of its development as it's continued to expand, and planets and solar systems have been formed around stars. And when we look at that pattern, how the universe has expanded and cooled and things have formed, some have looked at the Genesis account and said, that kind of looks like the days, if the days represent vast geological eras of time. Those people are called the day-age theory. So take the word day and don't think 24-hour period, think long geological era. And then read it back. And those people would even say it seems to even make sense in the order of things. Stars came later, they were formed, and then dry ground. Now, there's some issues with this one as well. So, but you can see them trying to take the Bible seriously and modern science seriously, right? Let me erase this one. And modern science seriously. See it? Still, others have come along and said, that's pretty silly. Yes?
Could you explain some of the errors with the age?
Can you do what?
Some of the errors with the age theory.
So, yeah, some of the errors would be...
hang-ups.
Yeah, so some of those hang-ups would be, like, on day 3, you get land forming. But then day 4, you get planets forming, or stars and moon and things, which they would say that's the era when solar systems were formed or something like that. How'd you get land before solar system? See the issue? It doesn't read, you kind of got to do a little work, a little imagination to make it really flow with how at least modern science is depicting the 13.8 or so billion years of our universe. You kind of got to work to get there. Go read it and see if you like it. There are really smart, both biblical Bible scholars and scientists that hold to this view. So I want to be fair. I don't hold this, not me either. You don't have to be what I am, by the way. Number 3 would be another group has come along and said, we're asking the wrong questions here. Let's stop asking these kinds of questions, alleviating our tension. Let me illustrate it this way for you. Let me say a normal English sentence, and I think almost all of you will understand what I mean, unless you just don't know anything about sports. Okay, so the Packers crushed the Cowboys.
Yeah, right.
I use the Packers for tie's sake since they lost last week, sadly and embarrassingly, to the worthless 49ers. The Packers crushed the Cowboys.
Both the teams just got insulted.
On the frozen tundra, okay? I was rooting for the Packers. I wanted them in there. What is this? Let me make it even harder. Forget the word Packers. Let's go with the Cheeseheads. Okay? Now, those of you especially don't know sports, you know exactly what I mean by this sentence, right? The Green Bay Packers, they won decisively against the Dallas Cowboys, a football team. And this tells me that they played in Lambeau, right? Because that's the frozen tundra. Dallas is not the frozen tundra. Now, think about this sentence, though. If I were to tie this sentence in an email, and 1,000 years from now, for some reason, people thought that our communication was really important, and they wanted to study it and learn about what Ty and I's relationship was like and what American culture was like, and they are in Asia 1,000 years from now. What would be the barriers you would need to overcome just understanding this one English sentence? Think about it. Think of how much work that would take. You could mistake. Like, you could see a person in Asia 1,000 years from now seeing this sentence and going, well, I like to read things literally, and I don't understand, but seems like there was a time when they had to be giants because they crushed them. So giant humans with cheese for heads killed, smashed Western horse riders in the Arctic Circle. Right? You can see somebody going, that's what that means. But you and I would know that's not what that means at all. When we do what's called hermeneutics, okay? Hermeneutics, which is what y'all should have been talking about the last couple of weeks. Hermeneutics is literally Bible study, interpretation. What hermeneutics is doing is taking away all the barriers to trying to understand this. What are the barriers? Let's assume they're not speaking English in Asia 1,000 years from now. You have to learn the language, first of all. Then you have to learn that these are not real literal things. They stand for something else. You have to learn grammar, how the verbs function in the sentence. That this verb is functioning metaphorically, right? Does it? You have to learn a lot to make sense of this one English sentence. Many Bible scholars have come to Genesis 1 and said, this is what's going on. Something like this. We read Genesis 1 3,000 years later from a different language with a different culture and are trying to impose on it a literalness or make it make sense in our worldview when we actually have to get into their skin, their language, their culture. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a little bit pedantic, I know. So the people that have come along and said, forget science and faith. Who cares? Let's just talk about what does the original language mean. One of those groups is called historical creation. Okay, and I'll give you the books to read if you get interested in these. The guys and girls that are positing this one would say that Genesis is not necessarily concerned with writing about the age of the universe. Genesis wants to describe God making everything in the beginning and then coming back and creating in 7 literal days, not the earth, but the Garden of Eden only. That's what's going on there. Okay? If you want to read on this one, by Genesis Unbound by John Sailhammer. It's the greatest name ever. John Sailhammer. Exactly how you would think. Genesis Unbound. I used to hold to this view. This is the one I held to. This is the one that Robert holds. I don't know where Spineless Roland is, because he won't tell me, and he just makes fun of me. Here's number 4. Okay? Number 4 would be this. I call it the polemic view, although I don't think that's a great name for it. Polemic comes from the Greek word for war or battle. Polema is war or battle. So to make a polemic argument is to make an argument against the other side. So Republicans make polemics against Democrats, and Democrats make polemics against Republicans. The polemic argument is forget science versus faith. Who cares? We are interested in what are the theological statements Genesis is making, primarily against the backdrop of other Mesopotamian, Egyptian worldviews. Okay? If you want the book on this one, it's called, I can't remember the authors on this one, but the name of the book is In the Beginning. It's a great title. In the Beginning, We Misunderstood. And they're going to walk you through how a lot of the things in Genesis 1 and 2 sound a lot like Egypt, Mesopotamia, Sumerian culture. And then they're going to go, maybe the comment is not necessarily be taken literally, but a theological statement more than anything else. I'll give you a good example in a minute when we talk about the image of God. Last one is called the Cosmic Temple. The Cosmic Temple, it says the same thing. So I'm going to put a hard line here between these. These are saying forgets the debate between science and faith. Let's understand the cheeseheads comment. Let's just do hermeneutics. This one, the Cosmic Temple guys and girls are saying that Genesis is not describing the material origins of the universe at all. It's not even talking about where did matter come from. Genesis is simply describing how God created order in this world and then came to dwell in it. The Cosmic Temple. The book on this one is called The Lost World of Genesis 1. The Lost World of Genesis 1 by John Walton. If you want a summary of it, just listen to the Bible Project's Cosmology series. They are John Walton fans. In fact, there's one with John Walton in it. In the Bible Project's little podcast thing, they had John Walton on an episode. So if you want to get that one and not have to read the book, listen to that episode. John Walton is the one with this view. I am currently convinced, as I read the text, that this one makes sense of it the best. But I might change as I read the text and study more and learn more. Maybe he's not. When you're doing theology, you're going to do the best you can with the knowledge you have to make the best sense of it. And when you learn more and you study more, you may adjust. I don't know why this is a problem. So, questions? This doesn't help your problem at all, though, which was why are there so many views? And I'll answer that really shortly. We take that text seriously, the Bible, because we think it is the authoritative word of God. And I want to do the best I can with the information that I have to make sense of it. And really smart people disagree on the best way to do that. That shouldn't frighten us or make us think, who could know? Somebody's right, or maybe none of these are right, and somebody else will come along and explain it better. But this is what theology is trying to do our best to make sense of the text with the knowledge that we have. And so let it motivate you, talking to you specifically, let this motivate you to go, I'm going to get after it. It might take me 2, 5, 10 years. I have been working through these things since biological anthropology, my sophomore year of college, because it freaked me out at the U of A. And I'm still doing it. So I just read another Walton book recently because I'm like, let's see if he's making sense of the rest of the text. And don't just take people because they're smart and have PhDs either. Follow-ups, questions on that? Yes.
Did you ever listen to the Marty Solomon one?
Is that the Bema?
Yeah, he did. He said it was just a big literary device to be.
Oh no, somebody did send me that. Yeah, I didn't agree with his chiastic structure in Genesis 1. I don't find, you can find a chiasm. Yeah, how about that? You can find a chiasm almost anywhere, it feels like, and some people love to find them. That's the only one of the Bema or whatever I've listened to, and I went, I don't see that in the text. Yes, a chiastic structure. Yeah. Chiasm is a way that Greeks write to highlight things.
Okay.
So we highlight by putting things in bold or italics. They do it by repeating. So idea A, then idea B, then idea C, then idea D, and then you build out from there, and it forms what looks like a Greek X, which is like chi, and so the center point becomes the highlighted thing. And the Bema podcast guy thinks that's what's going on in Genesis 1. And I think he highlights...
Well, he says that it's God creates a space, God fills that space in 4 through 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4 through 6, and then 7 is Sabbath rest.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole thing is, the point of Genesis 1 is to teach a slave people from Egypt that their worth is found in the fact that God thinks they're good because they're his creation and not because they're good at making bricks. So this whole thing was it's like what did you say, like a didactic poem to teach them a valuable truth, what they need to know about God and Sabbath.
I agree with some of his conclusions. I don't see the chiasm in it.
That's the express point of it.
Yeah. I wasn't convinced by that, but I did. That's the only one I've ever listened to on that. That Bema guy. People like him.
Where would that fit? Is that his own thing?
He would almost certainly, if he had to land in these, it would sound more like one of these, because. Here's where I'll give you where I'm at. I don't care about this. This changes a lot. It's going to continue to change. And so I don't worry when we send a new telescope out, by the way. It's like 30 times bigger than Hubble. It's supposed to see way farther. And I'm following it on my phone. It's really cool. They're going to open its little mirror soon. And I think that stuff's really cool. They're actually giant mirrors, like the size of this room. Yeah, they're huge. But I am interested. I hope y'all are interested in what. So I like that Bema guy because he's going, let me get into the text. That's where I'm not convinced that Genesis 1 is trying to establish the age of the earth at all. And so the young earth's starting point is that's what Genesis is trying to do. That might be an example of this. Saying, well, there once was a day when giant people with cheesy heads crushed Western cowboys. Anyway, does that kind of make sense, everybody? Here's what we're affirming in our faith, at least. This one note. Big idea. God created all that exists, and he made it perfectly good. That is clear in Scripture. I like to, especially with y'all, point out our skeptical friends' issues. I hope that's okay with y'all. Don't let our skeptical friends who ask you questions, don't let them get away with not thinking deeply about their cosmology. Cosmology is your view of the universe. Don't let them get away with it. It's easy to say Black Lives Matter and gay lives matter and all this. It's easy to say that, but if you take God out of the equation, I would ask why. We're going to talk about that again in a minute. But things like that, there's justice in the world. Says who? We're just in a big, giant, cosmic machine that's either really determined or a big accident. Pick your answer. They just don't think deeply, and they ask us to. So turn the tables on them, not in a mean way. Just say, let's talk about what you believe. And that's what I normally do when I run around with lost people, is I don't get in this game of defending something before I start challenging them lovingly. Then it's really fun. Everybody likes talking about what they think and believe. They just never do it. They never get asked. Questions before we move on? Okay, cool. Angels. We're talking about the creation of the world, the universe as we experience it. And then this thing that we never talk about, but Jews of the Second Temple period were obsessed with them, obsessed with them. But we never talk about them. Angels, these immaterial beings. Oftentimes let's just do it this way. I'm going to do it this way. Because we jump right to the New Testament here. All the passages are out of the New Testament. Let's first understand how these were understood in the Old Testament. When you read your Old Testament, there's a category you have to be aware of, or it'll freak you out. Psalm 82 is a good example of where this happens. When we talk about who God is, which we skipped those chapters, who God is, the way the Old Testament people conceive of this is there is Yahweh, and He's up there. Bless you, by the way. I'm not sure what that was. Do I bless that? Whatever that was? It was a strange noise that just came out of you. I don't think a blessing's appropriate for that, actually. I'm going to leave my blessing to the side. I retract the blessing. So here's how a Jewish person, here's how Paul, here's how Jesus, here's how David or Moses conceives of Yahweh. Yahweh is in a class all by himself. So thick line. There's nothing that goes between Yahweh and everything else. Everything is on the other side of this line because He is the creator. The Old Testament loves to affirm this. We just saw it. And number two, He is the ruler or the king over everything. And number three, He is the only one worthy of worship. Okay, so that's who Yahweh is. He's the creator, He's the ruler. And by the way, the Israelites, for Paul or David, they think Yahweh is in unique relationship with them as Israel. So when you read your Psalms, when you read your prophets, when you read the Old Testament, this is who they conceive of Yahweh to be. Not some deistic, distant, Platonic enlightenment thing, which is what most Americans do. We have to work to understand this. Now, on the other side of this line, they have different conceptions of being. Sometimes they're called seraphim. You see this word, by the way, anytime you see the I-M ending, that's just a plural. It's like their S. So seraphs or cherubim. Cherubim, so cherubs. Sometimes they're called melachoi, like angels. That's the Greek way, melech. Sometimes they're called sons of Elohim. Sometimes they're just called the Elohim. These are all different words to describe angelic immaterial beings. Other nations called these gods. The word for God is Elohim in the Old Testament. And these words show up all in your Old Testament. Okay? Then there's humans down here. We're going to get to them in a minute. By the time you get to the New Testament world, which is where all these quotes are coming from, these have all been distilled to really two categories. So take all of this and distill it down to the good ones, which we call angels. And what do we call the bad ones? Daimonions, demons. So angels and demons. And some of them we get mention of more specifics like the Ha-Satan, the Satan. We get some more specifics on that particular daimonion, that particular demon, that figure. So when we look at these texts, we're talking by the New Testament time, we have worked it down to mostly these two. Sometimes these get a catch-all. The rulers and authorities. So when you see Paul talking in like Ephesians, when you see Paul talking and saying, this is to demonstrate to the rulers and authorities, he's actually meaning it's demonstrating to this thing right here, which is actually pretty cool. Remember when you're in Ephesians 6, the really famous armor of God? Your battle's not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. So this, you have to understand that this is how Paul thinks. This is how Jew thinks. And these demon figures, what they normally do is they cause disunity, injustice, and pain in the world. And one of the things Paul is saying is these things that wreak havoc on the human condition, Jesus is demonstrating to them that he's the winner. He's beating them. He's the victor over them. That's pretty cool. We just never think about this stuff, especially at Fellowship. We're at New Heights right now, but probably talk about a little more. But we don't talk about this all that much. So when we read these passages, put this in your conception. Now let's look at them. Colossians 1. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or powers, put above thrones or powers, earthly kings, human kings, or rulers and authorities. That's going to be these spirit beings. Paul does this regularly. Thrones or powers is demonstrated to the Caesars, and rulers and authorities is demonstrated to these guys that I wrote on the board. All things have been created through him and for him. God, big idea, God created all the invisible beings, namely the angels and the demons, which is a distillation of seraphim and cherubim and meleks and sons of Elohim and Elohim from the Old Testament. Make sense? Mm-hmm. The next one. To which of the angels did God ever say, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool? Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Big idea. They are immaterial spirit beings who God made to serve God and serve people. Don't ask me about guardian angel. I have no idea. Second Temple Jews, some think yes, some don't. Yes?
Isn't there a passage in Hebrews that's talking about this, and it says that angels wish they, or this might be Paul, something like this, but angels like
long to look? Yeah, things that angels long to look.
So it says, like in Psalm 8, that like who is that men are mindful of him, and he made them little low and angels for a little while, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So is our final destination to be higher? Is that the right word?
I would not say it's our final destination. I would say it's our status at Adam and Eve. We were given a particular privilege that even angels were not, and that's pretty cool.
Is that being the image of God?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, by the way, the text you're looking for is 1 Peter 1:12, which is the next verse. Oh. Right there. So there's that. Questions on the angels. This is a category that if you go to seminary, they have a whole series of classes on angelology. And Roland, when and Robert's big We Believe book has a whole one on angelology. Roland distilled it down to 3 things, which I appreciate actually, because it's just a lot. But any questions and answers before we move on? Yes.
The demons.
Uh-huh.
Going back to Colossians, you said angels and demons. I think I'm hung up on all things have been created through him and for him.
Mm-hmm.
My perspective is the demons are not working in accordance with God at all.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get where I'm going with that? Like, that's just very confusing to me in that aspect.
So you will get to talk about that with Roland when you talk about the problem of evil in a few weeks. how can God be the agent of everything that exists
Yeah.
when there's evil that exists and bad things that exist? How can that be for God?
Okay.
And ask Roland that.
Right.
And then record it and send it to me because I want to see how
I'll write
Roland.
it down.
Roland actually is really good at making really complex theological and philosophical things pretty clear. And so that's why I like hanging out with Roland. I could be nice to Roland every once in a while. I'll be nice.
Do you ever call him Nick, or does it have to be Roland?
I don't think I ever call him Nick. I never call Pope like Brian Pope. I never call him Brian.
That's
No.
So, and I don't know why. I've landed with Roland almost always. Ryan Burton introduced himself today to somebody as Burton.
That's what he
Which
goes
was-
by.
yeah.
Largely.
I always call him Burton. So I never call him Ryan. I don't know why Roland's become Roland. In my phone, he's Nick Roland. So, Other questions on angels?
Ponder that.
Let me spend some time. I'm gonna drop everything and ponder why. Yeah. Why do you call him Roland? Has he talked about our college time together? He normally does. I'm 2 years older than Nick. We were in school at the same time, and that was really fun. He was a big dork. So, questions? I'm a cool guy.
This is a little bit different than angels, but we were talking about this at work yesterday. Actually, my boss was talking about just more like new age kind of stuff with like energy in the world, and like she did mention like it being a mountain and like there being many different paths and stuff like that. And so I was able to like, and she asked me like, what do you believe about that? And I was like, I believe differently. Like, I don't think that there are many paths. I believe God is Father, Son, Holy Spirit. When she was talking about, she was like, I get that. And like, I think I believe that too. But when I see like the energy in the world, like flowers opening up or stuff like that. And one of my other coworkers brought up spiritual warfare as far as like God creating everything, and like she was also mentioning that she's been listening to podcasts about different dimensions and things that we don't understand. And I thought that was a really, like, whenever my other coworker brought up the spiritual warfare aspect of it, I was like, that's great, because that is a dimension that we don't physically see, but God created. And so I guess I haven't really read into a ton of new age things. I want to listen more, but as far as like the energy, like, idea and then spiritual warfare, how would you communicate that to someone, I guess?
So you have a point of, we might say you have a point of something you can agree with them on, that there is more to the world than just the physical things we see. That's cool. Y'all could agree on that. A Christian would definitely not be affirming, though, and I'm assuming the way you described it, that there's just sort of a impersonal force and energy behind everything. Yeah. We have a personal being who is literally moved by things and responds to us and loves us. And so, but being able to say, man, there is I agree, there's actually more to it. Do you know it's actually a God that loves you. And he's not just a little nebulous force out there. He's personal. That might be a cool way to share the gospel with them. Or you can draw the bridge. But you might try that and see how that goes. We don't talk about this much in fellowship. If you want to study this more, the book I'd really recommend is called The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, Heiser. And he was on, I think, Dallas Seminary's Table podcast. So you might not have to, just Google him, Michael Heiser podcast. I'm sure he's on some podcast somewhere to listen to him. Unseen Realm is fascinating. It's a page turner. You can't put it down. So go borrow it or buy it.
Is that sarcasm?
No. I say that, but I told somebody that about a different book, and the guy bought it, and then he called me and said, that was the most boring book I've ever read. And I was like, I thought it was amazing. Yes.
I might have missed this, but just all the different names of angelic beings, is it because there's different, maybe levels of them, or different things they can do? Like, why is there so many names?
So, these are different than these.
Yeah.
And they have different functions and roles. These are normally messengers sent. These are normally around the throne of God. So when you read Ezekiel, and he starts talking about go read Ezekiel today, but you might need to drink a little bit before you do it. Go read Ezekiel, and I'm joking, because it starts weird. You're not allowed.
And people do watch them. It's being live streamed.
I'm joking. I'm joking. You shouldn't be drinking at all. So Ezekiel begins by talking about these figures that are around the throne. You have this moving throne chariot thing, and they're talking about some of these figures, and so they have different roles, and yeah, it's fun. It's weird. Unseen realm will make it all clear, and it might expand your ability to read. It's back to the cheesehead thing. You'll be able to read things how they understood it, and not how we do.
Foreign to me.
Yeah.
Christophany, theophany, where do those fall in? Are those in the center category or?
So the question of are any of these things, namely the Melech Yahweh, the angel of the Lord,
Yeah.
is that a pre-Christmas Jesus is your question, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Do they fall in the middle or it's?
So that would be what we would be if you were to say yes to that.
Okay.
What you're saying is Jesus goes on this side of the ledger, right?
Mhm.
Jesus is not down here.
Yeah.
Jesus is up here. When we affirm Trinitarianism, you'll talk about this. There's my marker. That's one of the crazy things about what the New Testament is affirming. We have to let the New Testament say what it's trying to say, how it's trying to say it. The New Testament comes along and says, all things have been made by him and for him. Nobody gets to go on this side of that line to a Jew.
Yeah.
And then Paul, and by the way, Jesus does it himself. That's why they kill him. Jesus starts walking around saying, I go up there. And yet we affirm that there's only one God up here. Welcome to Trinity and its difficulties. But what you'd be affirming is that Jesus crossed that line before Christmas and demonstrated himself in a way that appeared to be an angel, but it's really Jesus. And I literally have not landed where I think on all of those. Heiser has a chapter on it, actually. I tend to lean toward them not, but it's cool if it is. So that's kind of where I'm at. Roland may have a stronger opinion on those. Yeah, I mean, he'll tell you. Yeah, he'll tell you. So you see, but do you see what we're saying? We talk about, like when John 1 comes out of the gates and says, "In the beginning was the Word, and was with God, and the Word was God. All things came to be through Him." Well, that's putting Him up here. When it says, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me," that's a slot that Yahweh only has, and we're starting to put Jesus up there. That's really cool. This is how the New Testament talks about the Trinity. We come along and put all these words to it, but this is how the New Testament thinks about the Trinity. We worship Jesus. So all these categories are then used of Jesus. Welcome to Trinity. How the New Testament thinks of it. Yes.
Sorry, I have another question.
Please.
Like back then, were people being taught about these different angels and what they do?
Yes.
How do they know?
How do they know this? This is
You know what I'm
just
saying?
like I cannot prove that. When we see news reports and we go, how did that happen? And we even say something. There was one a few weeks ago. A helicopter crashed in Philadelphia or something. They were carrying a mom and a couple of kids, and it crashed, and they all survived. And even the police officers, even the news person was like, "This is a miracle. How did nobody die? This is a miracle." They weren't talking like that. I don't know why I made it sound like they sound like Ryan Burton there. So I don't know. I cannot prove as an atheist that was not a supernatural occurrence. But I promise you, every atheist is going, no, it's not a miracle. It's not a miracle. It's just lucky. Now that would be for that atheist, it's just the air they breathe. It's improvable. That's just the air that they breathe. There aren't miracles. For an ancient person, this is just the air that they breathe about how the universe is and what exists and all of that stuff. We read this now as modern. We're basically act like naturalists, but then we add Jesus on the side, which is unfortunate. We have largely kind of ignored all of this because it just doesn't compute in our modern world. Okay, I'm trying to understand the text, what the text is getting at. So I got to get in their world. This is how they conceive of it. Then the implications are, does that mean that's what is real? I'm going to trust the text. Even though it doesn't fit in my modern, I already erased the modern science for space. I'm just going to try to study this the best I can and live accordingly. Yes?
And so that passage that talks about, I forget where it is, so you can help me, but show hospitality to strangers, because in doing
Because you might be entertaining angels. Yeah.
So can they be material beings as well?
I think that passage is actually, we get that one a little weird. That passage is actually trying to say, hey, you know what? Because he says some have entertained angels without their knowing. He means Abraham did that. Remember Abraham in Genesis 18 when it's right the Sodom and Gomorrah story? This is a weird one. 3 men show up and Abraham begins to, hey, you're in a fun place to come into this conversation. Abraham then begins to speak with the 3 and they're speaking about, he makes them a meal. They sit down, they talk about him having his wife having a baby, she's in there laughing, and then 2 go off and whoop up on Sodom and Gomorrah. But the narration almost makes it seem like Abraham is continuing to talk to the 3rd. But in the next chapter, and they're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. But that figure then is called Yahweh. The Lord said to him. So it's just an ambiguous thing in the text. Was he speaking to Yahweh? But what that passage that you're talking about is just, I think, referencing to Abraham. Abraham entertained angels without even knowing, so be hospitable.
So it's referencing Abraham's hospitality.
I think it's referencing Abraham. I don't think it's going, I've heard some Christians are like, I should help that homeless guy because he could be an angel. I'm like, you should help the homeless guy, but that should be your motive. I think he's just referencing Abraham.
I see.
Yeah.
This is kind of an aside question, but just thinking about that specific situation, just like, okay, Abraham having a personal sit down kind of conversation with potentially a Yahweh or truly Yahweh figure. Has anyone seen the face of God? No, right? I guess it's not Jesus.
So here's the question. This would be an example where somebody would say, it looks like Abraham's talking to Yahweh, and we need somebody from the Yahweh slot to come and be that person he's talking to. So this must be a Christophany or a pre-Christmas Jesus appearance. And that I don't know what to do with that. So I'm trying to follow the text as it leads, and I got a lot of questions about that.
Think about Old Testament God, on the mountain, no one can actually look at his face or you die. So I'm like, okay, or think of that context.
Yeah, what I like to say is we have to allow the Bible to give us a complex picture of Yahweh. He's actually way cooler than sort of the Platonic deist God that we have. We have this sort of unmoved grandpa in the sky. And Yahweh just isn't that. He when we're studying this Jonah, the word nahammed towards Nineveh, changed his mind or emotionally responded or had compassion. Yahweh's just a little bit more complex. And these are the kind of passages that make me go, that's hard. I don't know what to do with this, but I'm trying to follow as best I can. And I don't know why we wouldn't expect that. We believe that Yahweh is 3 in 1, but one. But yeah, so yeah, it's complex. And I've tried to take out the Platonic thing that we do, which is, here's the Platonic God. Let me find some verses that say that. Boom, I've got it. And just let the narrative of the Bible kind of create Yahweh for me. And it's actually pretty cool. Let's take a 3-minute break. Come back at 2:00, and we'll get going again. We don't want to sit here for 2 straight hours. So take a break, a few minutes. We'll come back, stretch your legs. If you go to the bathroom, whatever that looks like. We're going to talk about people. You shouldn't drink. Alcohol's evil. It's bad. Want to go to Fossil Cove? Unless you're at Fossil Cove, then it's okay.
This has nothing to do with this class. This has nothing to do with this class.
I sent you a meme one time and you didn't respond, so I sent it to you again.
You sent me a meme?
Yes. This is a while ago.
It's actually pretty funny.
Okay.
What?
So student discipleship.
Yes, sir.
Kid yesterday, and we were in John 8, and he asked me, it's in 28 says, Jesus said to them, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am. And he was kind of like, what does it mean when we say lifted up? And so is that like resurrection, ascension, exaltation, or like lifting up on the cross dying? I see.
Yeah, it's
truly is the man.
John uses that in the mouth of Jesus. Really ironically. So go trace it. Just do a word study on it.
Yeah, and there's three different areas.
It's very ironic. He means for you to see. He will be lifted up, which can mean exalted. Can mean, but how is he lifted up? By being lifted up. The same word will be used with the cross. So John's, one of the themes John is developing is he is the exalted king through a cross, which is like brilliant and cool. So yeah, I think he has the cross throughout John's gospel.
And then the meanings behind it.
Yeah, this is how he's being exalted. All other kingdoms come by putting people on crosses, but he has come to shame the cross. He's being lifted up on a cross, therefore it's just really clever on John by Jessica. Yeah, so yeah, go do a word study and mark all of them, and then I think the theme will be.
That's what I said. I told him I was going to show something smart to me.
You're on the right track. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, I was like, you got it.
Also, some of them Ezekiel right now.
Weird, isn't it?
I think I'm like 8 or something like that. So it's talking about the wheels, and those things, those like, says the wheels have eyes, and I'm like, I don't know, do that.
It is symbolic language to describe God's rule, reign, and presence. And it's said in a vision. It's a vision, and so the question always becomes: is Ezekiel having an actual vision? This is what he's seeing, and then he's supposed to interpret a symbol, or is he trying to put language, symbolic language, to a concept? But he's not actually seeing. Is he seeing a movie reel and then he goes and describes it, and then he's like, "What is that?" Or is he just describing? So if I describe something as streets of gold, do I see a movie reel of streets of gold in Revelation, or is he just trying to describe abundance, the concept using symbolic language? And if the jury's out on which one is what Ezekiel has in mind, whatever you decide, the author of Revelation is doing the same thing. So, yeah.
One more question?
Yeah.
Or go for it. Okay, sweet. But it never returns back. What is the purpose of like? I don't know. Like my argument is like the second temple has technically no mysticism or like I don't know spiritual gravity since it's category, but still the veil's torn to symbolize, not to show like a room scene. So I don't know, like what is? How should I view the second temple? Like, I don't see the second temple of having the same weight as the temple of Solomon.
That's a really complex question that we'll be talking about later. The question needs to be this: how did the second temple Jew understand the temple? Especially after the Maccabean Revolt. They do think there's an amazing outpouring of God in those 8 days of light. Then what is Jesus doing with the symbol of the temple? Then what does any of this mean after Pentecost, when the Shekinah returns, but in us? So right, so there's your, so yeah, we got to work through all that. But isn't it cool to go, okay, Ezekiel's got the Shekinah leaving, and it shows back up on Pentecost in us? That's crazy. That's a mind blow. All right, here we go. Are we enjoying this today? Are we having fun? Good. I always probably have more fun than y'all even, so I enjoy this a lot. According to our secular, naturalistic worldview, so the air that we breathe culturally in the West, especially the academic air we breathe, is this. Here's a human being, okay? According to the secular naturalistic worldview, this is what a human is. This is who you are. You are made up of 65% oxygen, 18% carbon, 10% hydrogen, 3% nitrogen, 1.5% calcium, 1% phosphorus, 0.35% potassium. You got some sulfur, sodium, magnesium, and then other trace elements. You have been instinctually hardwired by evolutionary processes, and you have a genetic code that largely determines who you are, how you look, what you can accomplish, and then the way your parents, as other primates, raised you, created some of those instincts and have hardwired them in, and that's it. That's all you are. Isn't that nice? It's beautiful, right? Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I should add, you will live on this planet for however long you can. There is no meaning to any of your life. One day you will die like all other animals do. You will go into the ground, and within just a couple of years, almost all of your flesh will be gone, and give it a few more and your bones will be gone as well, and none of it meant anything. Eventually the sun will become a red giant, swallow up this planet, and then as the universe cools, the big crunch, it might start over, it might not. It's nice, isn't it?
What a great depiction.
Now here's why I start, this is how I start, not just the resident class, but even the one when we teach on Sunday morning. That's not fun, right? Nobody likes that. We live in a culture that has largely failed to think about the implications of its worldview. I said it earlier, I'm saying it again. If that's all we are, then where does justice arise in that? Besides just we've agreed to it. And if some other country or some other tribe says, I don't agree to that anymore, what right do I have to say that's evil or that's wrong? Especially if they have bigger guns. Don't they just win? We live in a culture that has largely said we don't like the Christian view of things. They really hate the Muslim view even more. And they want to adopt this. They want this to be true. And they think most run-of-the-mill people, if you ask them on the street, Big Bang, yeah. Evolution, yeah. That's how we got here, yeah. That's it, yeah. Maybe there's some way out there. The reality is, if that's all we are, there's no beauty in that. There's no hope in that. There's no meaning in any of that. And we have failed to press them on that. They adopt that, yet also say we should be tolerant, loving, gracious, accepting, that lives matter. I am just baffled at the failure of the church, us, to just be good thinkers. And it's not that hard. What do you believe? Okay, let's talk about what you believe. Okay, do you believe that's it? No. You don't believe that? Okay, why? And on what basis? And how do you know? Is there a God? Has he revealed himself? Show me, tell me. And they don't have answers. And if they do, it's basically just a big, giant mess of inconsistencies. And yet we get defensive because they start challenging us about our sex view or something. Just take a deep breath and start asking them questions. I like to do this so that everybody can see. I think we have a beautiful story, and one that our culture has robbed from us, but doesn't know they've robbed it. So what's our story? Let's look at it. Let's turn the page to page 38, because he's got both text printed here, and then we'll come back to 37. We get to the pinnacle of the creation account, and verse 26. This is set in an ancient Near Eastern context. We want to make sense of it. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness. Okay, we have to understand, and in 27 it says, so God did that. He made mankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. What does the image mean? Did y'all talk about this in Panorama? Yeah. You did? Did you like it? Did you see how beautiful it was? Or should we redo it? It's cool, right? Redo it real fast. So, in the ancient Near Eastern world, you've got all the gods. So that same picture we had up there, all these Elohim, and they had different names for them. By the way, the seraphim, those are also used in Mesopotamian culture. They have the same words for it. You have the sons of Elohim all up here, and all these gods need to be made happy. And the best way to make them happy is we want to appease them. And in the ancient Near Eastern culture, both in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Sumerian cultures, they are the gods. And humans, if you remember the Enuma Elish, or pick your ancient story, humans were created to serve them, to feed them. In a lot of the stories, there was a big battle between these things, and then one of them was cut in half. That became the sky and the land, and then humans became the mixing of the dirt and their blood together, and then we were created to serve them and feed them because the gods got tired of doing all the stuff they didn't want to do. Beautiful. That's not as bad. That's actually better, I think, than the modern one. At least you have a purpose in that one. That's how those stories unfold. And if there is any human who is made in the image of God, which they all understand the concept of the image of God, it's always one guy, the king. Here's all the humans. We're created to be the slaves of the gods down here. And our job is to serve the gods. His job is to sit on his throne, and he makes the gods happy. Therefore, we serve him so he can make the gods happy. This guy is made in the image of the gods. This guy. And by the way, it didn't surprise us that this guy would then go put statues of himself all over his territory. So when you see the sphinxes, that's kind of what's getting across here. It's human faces, but they're kind of like gods, right? This is how ancient Near Eastern people think about the, quote, image of God. Now, I hope just even seeing it, you'll be like, that is the most radical, dramatic demonstration or statement about humanity. Because some of these people are Israelites. And they're actually even worse because they're the slaves of the Egyptians, who were the slaves of the image of God. So here's our, I circled them. I'm going to put them down here. These are my Israelites. Moses comes to write a text. And here's what he writes. Here's our view of humanity. And this has become the Christian one as well. God said, let us make ha-adam is the Hebrew, mankind. It's not just Adam. And I like, this is NIV, I think. Let's make mankind, not man, mankind, in our image. So who is it? Is it the king? No, mankind. Oh, is it just the men? No. Male and female. He created them. Put yourself in Israel's shoes. You are wandering in the wilderness. Y'all took Panorama? This is your redemption, wandering. Remember, you wander in the wilderness? You're wandering around out there, and Moses is telling you your stories. And some of that's what he ends up writing. And as he's telling you these stories, he goes, hey, you know what? Pharaoh, he's not the image of God. Well, he is. But it's not just Pharaoh. It's actually, come over here, Reuben, descendant of Reuben, your image of God. And come over here, Sarah, image of God. Collectively, we are the image of God. What did this person do, the image of God? Well, he's supposed to reflect the goodness, the power, and the beauty of that God in the land. Now, what do we all do? Reflect the goodness, beauty, and image and power of that God out into the land. That's awesome. So let's say it this way. The homeless dude on the street is made in the image of God and meant to reflect the goodness and wonder and beauty of God alongside of us. So that's why his life matters. And the black person is made in the image of God. That's why his life matters. And the gay person, who we might not agree with on some things, but their life also matters. I am frustrated with Christians because we have failed to run this through all the way. The unborn life matters. This should be one of our hallmark, you stole that from us. You don't get that from evolution in a closed system. So just figure out your way to do what I'm doing, help people see the beauty in it. That's awesome. That should be the thing we stake our claim on. Our culture is demanding lives matter, but has no reason for it. And we have the reason. So don't let them get away with it. I shouldn't say it that way. That sounds like we're in a fight. Help them see the beauty in this. Questions on who humans are? The big idea. God made mankind to be a picture. I like to think of it as a mirror. A picture works too of his character and to rule on earth. I want you to write down next to the big idea there. We are royal princes and princesses. That's who we are. Princes and princesses. Any view of complementarianism, which is that there are distinctions and roles of the church, Any view on that fails to remember first and foremost that women are made in God's image is missing something significant. The history of racism in the church has missed page 2, page 1, I guess. That's pretty awesome. Questions? If you haven't reflected on that in a while, go have a quiet time on that when it warms up. Just go spend some time on that and go outside and start thinking, man, me and us are to reflect the goodness and beauty and wonder of God into the world. That's what we're called to do. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Go back a page to Genesis 2. That's the climax of Genesis 1. And then what we get, so the humans are made in God's image. Chapter 2, we're going to get 2 humans brought into a garden. First Adam and then Eve. And what we're going to see is Yahweh Elohim, so the Lord God, formed a man. This is going to now pinpoint one of these humans. And I want you to put a number 1 next to the dust of the ground. Little number 1 there. We have a material aspect to us. But put a number 2 next to breath of life. God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Big idea. God made humans with both a material and an immaterial. Now here's the difficulty is, come over here. This is really mysterious. And I'm not exactly sure how to state it or draw it. You are not just, what was my list here? Oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen. It's not, you have those things, and the physical matters. Your body matters. Like it actually matters. When Paul reflects on this in the New Testament, he will say, your body is now a temple of the living God. Like your body does matter. It must make you happy. Okay. But you also have, I don't know how to reflect this. You have a breathed into his nostrils. I don't like the word soul so much here. The Hebrew word is nephesh. Okay. Nephesh is the word here. Nephesh is your being, your essence. We use the word soul, but sometimes when we think about soul, we think of 2 things that are very distinct, my body and my soul. And you need to make those more intertwined than I have my body, then I have my soul. That's very Platonic. Body, then I have my soul. Platonism is body bad, material bad, soul good. Don't do that. That's not Hebrew. That's not Jesus. That's not Paul. That's very Greek Platonic. Somehow, though, if you want to use the word soul for nephesh, make them together. This is who you are. I like to think of it this way. You are an embodied nephesh. By the way, this is what you will be in the eternal state. You're raised to be this forever. You're not supposed to be nephesh up there and body down here. That's only going to be in the intermediate state, which we'll talk about later. Yes?
And a little bit of the last 2 weeks, Nick kind of broke down for us, like, it seems similar to what you're talking about, this idea that, like, in Western thinking, or maybe it comes from, like, Greek philosophy, that, like, our head and our body, or our head and our heart are separate. When you say, like, is that kind of what you're speaking to as well? That, like, we kind of hold that, like, the soul and body are separate?
Yeah, similar. We're saying similar things. Here's a good example. Love the Lord your God with all of the Hebrew word is lavav. But it's not, we think of heart, we go, my emotions. Lavav is not so much my feelings. It is my will, like my inclinations, my heart. It's the direction of my life. Love the Lord your God with all of your lavav and with all of your nephesh, your being. But is that my soul? Well, don't think the thing that escapes from me to go to heaven when I die. No, that's not it. My being, my very life. And then the last word is my me'od, which just literally means my very. It's the word for very. Like I love you very much, very much.
Which is strength.
So we translate that as strength, but what is that? What do I do with that as an English translator? There's a reason why by the time you get to Jesus, they added a 4th one, which was in Greek, the naos, which is the word for mind. Because they're trying to get all of that together, and by the time you get to the Greek world of the 1st century, they're going, those 3 words don't really capture it perfectly. Let's add one to make it clear. So Jesus actually used forgive you for, because he's adopted that. what's my nefesh in that sense? And how's that different than my levav, which is my inclination? And how's that different from my me'od, which is my very muchness, my strength, or what do I do with those words? That's the way a Hebrew thinks. That's why they pray that every day, those words right there. And so, I don't know how to translate those. So they added naas, or mind, to make it crystal clear.
Yeah.
Now we might call it, in American culture, we might say, love the Lord my God with all my stuff, with all my will, and with all my being and emotions and life, my very identity or something. We might use identity language to capture it for nefesh. So, yes, Isaiah, is that you? He's done. I love this image of God thing, and we got to recapture it. Now, what went wrong? Dun, dun, dun. It's all fun and games. Now we get to the fall. Let me give you the picture. If you've spent any time in any class with me, I'm sure you've seen this. What's the idea? God wants to invite humanity. So this is Adam and Eve. He invites humanity into a garden space up on a hill. Up on a hill, by the way, it's from Ezekiel 28. And he puts in that garden 2 trees. I'm sure they weren't pine trees. I don't know how to draw any other trees. Okay, they were pines. Yeah, they were modern American pines. Yeah, just like that. Christmas trees. Here's the idea in Genesis 2. God invites humanity to come into the place where he dwells, Eden. And then to be filled with his presence, be filled with his goodness. This is our job. And then to take that blessing, that goodness, down out to the rest of the world as we build cities and as we make houses and all that. What are you laughing at?
I'm freaking out about Garden City.
What is Garden City?
It's a great book. Garland.
What is that?
John Mark
Comer.
Come on, it's about this.
It's our book that we're recommending you.
It's very good.
Okay, somebody buy it for me. I'm way over my library by like double, so
Right now, so you can
somebody buy it for me. Does he say this? Is this what he's saying in that book? Okay.
No, it's all about this.
Very cool then. Very cool. So if this is the picture, sounds like he's read his Old Testament, this guy. If this is the picture of what we're supposed to be in Genesis 2, we're in a systematic theology class, and sometimes we miss the story because we want to get to the bullet points. So this story of Genesis 3 is a story. It's inviting you to see the story and then to reflect on it, and maybe you form some theological bullet points. But first, see the story. Now, we don't have to read the whole thing. You are very aware of the story. This one, and I'll just pick one. This is the tree of life. Humanity's invited to experience life by eating of this tree. And they do that, you might say, by just simply trusting Yahweh. Trust me, and you'll get life. You'll experience life, and life abundantly. Not just life in heaven, but life to the full. Jesus is going to say all the same stuff, by the way. He's going to take the same story and say, it's now accomplished in me. Or you can take from the tree of wisdom, or the knowledge of good and evil, and that will represent whatever the opposite of trusting Yahweh is. Just read the story. Is it lack of trust? Is it taking instead of receiving? Whatever words you want to put here. So we'll say taking power or wisdom instead of receiving it and trusting Yahweh for it. If you choose life, you will be of the tree of life, then you'll have abundance. If you take that on your own, then what will happen is instead you will experience death. Why death? Because you'll be sent out from the place where life is and you'll no longer have life. It's a story. They could have life and life everlasting, or they will experience death. Okay? This is it's a fantastic way to communicate these things, because we actually get this in our sin, don't we? We really do get this. And if he just wrote bullet points for us, we'd be like, it's kind of dry. But the story, you could simmer on it and reflect on it. So look at the story. Look at some of this stuff here. Verse 6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree, put number 1 by this, was good for food. Number 2, pleasing to the eye. And number 3, desirable for gaining wisdom. put next to that 1 John 2:16. 1 John 2:16. We're on the bottom of page 38, by the way. So put next to verse 6 of Genesis 3, 1 John 2:16. We see the tragedy here. This is the great tragedy. Instead of trusting Yahweh and experiencing life, humanity instead took power, took wisdom, Adam and Eve, into their own hands. And now, as a result of that, you look at page 39. Verse 23, this is Genesis 3, verse 23. It's at the bottom of that long quote there. We're going to come back and talk about the curse in a minute. So Yahweh Elohim, the Lord God, banished them from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken, and drove the man out. And he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden a cherubim. There's one of your little things. And a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way of the tree of life. Instead of experiencing the blessing of Yahweh, and in making the rest of the world look like the amazing, what's the name of that book? Garden City? That's not bad. Because you're making the rest of the world look like the garden. That's pretty clever. I get it now. I get what he's doing. Instead of doing that, now humanity, where's my eraser?
Y'all are killing me.
Now, they are, I don't know how to draw a flaming sword, so now, that's not bad. Now humanity finds itself not experiencing life. And everywhere humanity goes, now they're going to experience whatever the opposite of life is. So we refer to that as death, but it's certainly much more than death, right? It's the pain and the injustice and the brokenness and all the things that we see when humans take power in their own hands instead of trusting God for it. This is going to be the whole story of the Bible. Just trust me and experience life. Go look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, or 32? 32, I think it is. When God says to Moses, trust me and you will live, but do not, it was in Panorama, and you will die. It's the same idea over and over and over again. Now death is what we spread instead of life. So instead of taking Garden City, so take that. Now we take. I should have made this tree ugly.
In a city.
Are those the trees?
These are trees. Yeah, make it like a garden. Yeah, in a city.
Exactly.
So doing that, this needs to be an ugly tree. This is an ugly tree. Now we take ugly death trees out.
Ugly death tree.
Ugly death trees. Okay.
I think that's a good tree because you made them go to the right.
To the direct. Yeah. See, that's not bad.
You picked the right tree for that one.
Robert always said, and I agree, and you've heard me say it before, figure out how you're going to draw all this stuff. Because otherwise, it just gets really complicated, and almost all of you are dealing with people that are not scholars in seminaries, so you have to draw it, or not going to make sense of it. So if you're dealing with a ninth grader, you're going to have to draw some for them. So, do you see the point? This is the story that it's trying to tell. Now let's look at our bullet points as Roland wrote them for us. Did he even give us any bullet points there? He did not. Let's get to Romans 5. Look how Paul reflects on this. Put Paul back in his Jewish context. Let Paul have this story, okay? And now what he says in Romans 5 will be like, oh, that's a great way to describe that. Look what he says. But when you read Romans, we get all weirded out because we're reading it and we're like, this is dense. And this is theological, and I can't understand it. You almost start reading Romans with this defeated attitude, and then you get to Romans 9 about God choosing and not choosing. You're like, okay, I give up. So you just give up. And Romans is hard, and it has a lot in it, but the more you can put yourself back in Paul's world, the more verses like this don't sound quite as maybe sterile. Hear it. Consequently, just as one trespass resulted in condemnation for all people, he's going to then contrast that with what Jesus did. So also one righteous act resulted in justification or being made right and life for all people. Does that sound like you're just being brought back to where life? I mean, this is the story that Paul is simmered on, because it's the story that the Jews were simmered in. Paul's a Jew. For just as through the disobedience of the one man, the many were made sinners, so also through the obedience of the one man, the many were made in the right with God, or made righteous. Our big idea, all mankind was condemned as guilty, is how we're terming it here. Or this infection called sin, it spread to all mankind. Now, Roland is capturing an idea here that I'm going to introduce. And the idea here is what we often refer to, and I want you to write it down next to that big idea. Protestant scholars, evangelical Protestant scholars, have taught this for last several hundred years, and I want you to see it. What Roland is getting at, he worded it very carefully, is we are three-way, I don't know, that's how I always say it, three-way sinners. Or however you want to, if you don't like the word sinner, just we're broken in three different ways. Guilty in three different ways. So let's write them down. First, the first way is we have, and by the way, what I'm doing here is putting the theology categories to the story, all right? I like this way, but we got to do the theology categories so you know what they are. The first way is we have what's called imputed sin. Here's imputed sin. Okay? And when you see the word imputed, imputed means it is even just defining it will make it use another big word. Something is reckoned to you or said over you. Okay? Here's imputed sin. When Adam sins, here's all the descendants coming after Adam, all the way to you. Okay, this is you. Imputed sin would be this. That sin was passed directly to you. It was reckoned to you, spoken over you in that sense. It didn't descend all the way to you. In that one sin, you were found guilty. This is called imputed sin. Okay? And many think that's what Romans is getting at. Romans 5 right there. Okay? The second big category, turn the page. Ephesians 4. So I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the emptiness or futility of their mind, their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Here's the big idea, and you can see this in other places. Every person has a sinful nature, which means they are inclined to sinful choices. I think Romans 5 is teaching this as well. Here's our second big category. You have inherited sin. Okay? Meaning, let's draw it over here. Adam passed a sin nature down to his kids, who passed it down to their kids, who passed it down to their kids, who passed it to you. You were born with a sinful nature, yes.
And Jesus did not have one of those.
This would be why some would say Jesus was born of a virgin. Why a virgin birth? Because the inherited sin of Adam was not passed to him in that sense. That'd be why some theologians think that he was born a virgin. Yes.
How early is that idea?
Which idea?
The second.
Inherited sin?
Yeah.
Inherited sin is very early.
Isn't it Augustine?
Augustine's the one who champions it, but you can see this in Second Temple Jewish writings and how they're thinking. I think that it's pretty easy to demonstrate that one in Paul. Here, I'll put something to think about. I'm not even saying where I land. I'm not exactly sure. What is Romans 5, 18 and 19 really getting at? What's it really getting at? I like to view it as the story. Death, these, what do I call these? Ugly dead trees? Yeah. We are spreading death now everywhere we go. And now all the human condition finds itself being infected by this infection called death. In the story, I like that language. But the theologians come along and go, let's put words to that. And we've come up with these kinds of categories to describe what Paul sees there. Does that make sense? Number 3, look at the next one down on page 40. James 1. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone, but each person is tempted when they are, notice it, this is a really cool verse it's not cool, it's sad, but it's worth studying, on how sin works. When they are dragged away by their own evil desire, and they're enticed, then after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Every person sins personally. So I want you to underline on those 3 big ideas, starting with the one on page 39. Underline the word condemned as guilty on page 39. That's your imputed concept. On page, 40? Underline the words sinful nature. That's your inherited sin. And then in the James 1 comment, underline the word personally sins. That's right here. You have committed personal sin. Now, we're going to go here next week, but I can't wait. So I'm going to give it away now. Because that's bad news. This right here is why many and most Protestants would say, 2 Corinthians 5:21, Jesus has now given you imputed righteousness. He made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, that we might be reckoned as righteous. Romans 4. That inherited sin problem that we had, this is why we need and must be born again. Because now we have a new nature. I mean, Paul will literally come around in places like Galatians and say, that nature has been killed. So some of y'all in the room, I'm myself included, when you start walking around with this head down, I can't defeat sin, I'm just a loser, and you are not letting the theology, and especially like people you disciple, especially guys, but I know girls have the same struggle, but especially with pornography, guys just have this mindset that I'm defeated before they even go into the battle. And man, like, help them see, like, no, you've been born again. Go read Romans 6. Paul means you to think you were baptized in his nature and you've been raised in his new nature and you are no longer a slave to sin. Sometimes we have to help them even see you can win the battle. Like if Arkansas goes to play Bama, they're like, it's going to be a bloodbath today. Bet we lose by 50. They're going to lose by 50. There's no way they're going to win that game. They go out there and go, we can win this thing. Now, Bama walks out there and goes, got it in the bag. This is actually what, we're the Bamas of this story. We should be. And then personal sin. This is Romans 6 idea. You are no longer a slave to that. You don't have to be drugged into its enticing desire. Isn't that kind of cool? That's next week, by the way, but I didn't want to leave you on only bad news for today. So we have to understand, so this is you. We're talking about what's wrong with the world today. Protestant evangelicals teach you were reckoned guilty. You also inherit, I should have written it's inherited on this side. You inherited a sin nature and you suck. So you also sin. Being recorded, sorry, you have personal sin. Personal sin. So, now this doesn't preach that well to the modern world, does it? Like, the people like to hear this. We said at the very beginning, though, your problem must match the solution, right? The problem must match the solution. So if you're talking with a modern, secular, skeptical person, they don't agree with any of this. So the cross seems way out of whack. There is a place to helping people see what is wrong with humanity in the world. What I like to talk about is in categories of the brokenness. That's why you hear me say all the time, instead of using sin, in sermons, I try to never use the word sin without first saying a long list of things like the brokenness and the pain and the injustice and the wounds that we see in our culture, both out there and in here. By the way, we call that sin because people don't have a concept of sin anymore. It sounds very Christian-y. And so talking with a lost person, you got to get a little creative. But the problem, if this is the problem, then the cross is our only hope. If we're all just good people and we need to be motivated a little bit to be better, then the cross is a terrible exaggeration. It's overreaction on God's part. In fact, he's evil. So guys like Richard Dawkins come along and say, whatever the Christian story is about, I don't want anything to do with it because it sounds like divine child abuse. He's starting from a position that we're all essentially good, and there is no God. So let's reason the stuff out. Look at the next page, page 41. If you want to get a crystal clear view on how the story works for Paul, go read Romans 1:18 and following. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people. Notice the action here. This is not a passive verb, it's an active verb. Who suppress the truth by their wickedness. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became empty or futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. They claimed to be wise. This is just him taking the story and running it again and again and again in all the nations that we see and all the people that we see, and you and my and both our lives together. We claim to be wise, but we were fools and exchanged. Underline that word, exchanged. The glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings and birds and animals and reptiles. Sin is turning from God toward anything that is contrary to his nature and purpose. Call that idolatry, call it pride, call it whatever words you want to call it. Great. But don't divorce from the story. This is what Paul's marinating on. Taking power on our own. What word are we going to put here? Pride? Is that idolatry? Is it selfishness? What's the heart of sin? That's what Roland's trying to get at here. He's calling it turning from God. Oh, I like that too. What do you want to call this? And this is what humans do at a micro and macro level every single day. And Jesus has offered us the Garden City. Yeah, is that right? Is that how we do it? There's your 1 John 2, by the way. You already wrote it down earlier. Everything in this world, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. Turn the page. Here's how we conclude. Romans 3 is trying to capture this idea. The Gentiles, that's chapter 1, they're guilty. The Jews, who are the rescue agent, they're the ones chosen to bring the restored blessing. They also have failed. Look at the failure that they have. What shall we conclude then? Do we, the Jews, have any advantage? No. We have already made the charge that Jews and Gentiles alike are under the power of sin. No one righteous, not even one. No one who understands. No one who seeks God. All have turned away. They're worthless. No one does good, not even one. The wages of sin is ugly dead trees. Right? Okay? So I hope this exercise helps you to see Romans 6:23 is not just some random proof text verse. It sits in a big story. I love Romans 6:23. So I'm not anti it, but we have to put ourselves back in the story. Then it pops a little bit more. Summary of biblical truth, then we'll do our questions. We saw God originally made everything that exists, and he made it good without any flaw or evil. God made mankind with material, immaterial, to know him, make him known. That's pretty cool. You all were nodding. It's pretty cool. Because of the fall, we call it the fall, this story, every person is guilty, imputed, sinful, inherited, and sinning. See the language? So Roland's being, when you asked earlier, what should we do with your theological, you have to write your, what's he calling it? Your own doctrinal statement. This is Roland. Like number 3 is like, man, that's a lot of theology to condense to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 words. That's pretty good. That's a lot. I guarantee you Roland slaved over number 3. How am I going to word this? Or he just borrowed it from somebody else. But that person slaved over it. Number 4, the fallen person is unable to do what is right and pleasing to God. Number 5, the penalty for our sin is the wrath of God against that sin and death. I'm going to add a number 6 for you. Number 6. This is what Romans 3 is getting at. And I like the story more than the bullet points. Number 6 is this. The agent of rescue, comma, Israel, is also broken under sin. The agent of blessing, comma, Israel, comma, is also broken under sin. That will be important next week. Jesus thinks he's just doing the very thing Israel was called to do, which was restoring humanity back to the place of blessing. Now, Roland gave you some questions on page 44 that you may want to ask. We can talk about whatever you want. If you have no questions, we'll get out early. You're not as happy now with all that sin talk. Everybody's tired now. I need to get some coffee. How many of y'all got COVID from chill out? I thought it was a super spreader. It wasn't that bad. It's not that bad. How many kids got it? How many students got it?
I don't know the number on that one.
Was it in the dozens or hundreds?
One of my 2 kids got it.
50%. Yeah, well, I'm going to go with 50% got it. So based on Cody's numbers, that's my number. That's all I need. That's my only data point I need.
And then their parents got it too.
So it was a super spreader of it. Yeah. I'm glad Chill Out can leave its mark. We got 17 minutes, so any questions that you'll have on any of this, you might look back over it. And we covered a lot of ground.
I have a coworker who I talk about being the Bible as sexist probably once a week.
Mhm.
What? Yeah, just I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
How you would answer too.
I think the first thing I'd do is take him to that. I would draw. You may not be able to draw it, but help them understand that picture of the image of God.
Yeah.
That might just be a great place to start, so they can see, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. And you might even make this extra statement. I didn't make it here. That was radically different than anything in the ancient Near Eastern world. Like, that's weird. So for Moses to walk around saying that, that's different. I would not hesitate then if she's not satisfied. If he's not satisfied with that, it's a he.
Yes.
Well, you may ask him
Yeah.
why. Like, why is he? Some people, I think I've heard me say this before. Some people have their Heisman, so it's the stiff arm, the thing that keeps you at bay. Which oftentimes that Heisman is not something they really even care about. It's more of a gotcha.
Yeah.
And you may go, hey, suppose, sometimes when I can sense the Heisman, sometimes that's when you need to walk away from the conversation. You're giving me your Heisman, we've been talking for 20 minutes, let's talk about the game or whatever. But other times, you have to disarm that, and I've even asked somebody, suppose I could give that a satisfactory answer for you on that. Would you then be like, yeah, I love Jesus and the whole thing? What? The answer is going to be, no, of course not. So can I talk about what's kind of keeping you there? Just almost see if you can bypass the stiff arm. But I would not hesitate to take him then to Jesus and to have women as the first proclaimers of the great story that Jesus has been raised from the dead. The early church would have had a lot of pressure to let's just erase that one. Just leave that story out. You can still have it with Peter and the other guy showing up, but they kept it in. That's profound to me. So there's little things you could do, but if it's a Heisman, it doesn't matter. If they give me the stiff arm and that's their stiff arm tactic, you're gonna have to reach past the stiff arm and do something else. So that's what I would do with this dude. You might ask him why. Like, why is this really bothers you? Can I ask why something happened to your family or a sister or your mom or? See what it is, and you'll find out pretty quick. No, it's just a Heisman for him, or no, he has something really wounding. Then you start talking about that. How do you find hope in that brokenness and blah blah blah? Now you're talking about something different. So, talking to lost people should be fun. We did the evangelism class back in the summer, but it does take some like dodging and weaving and thinking, and it's people have continually told me that. You may enjoy that, but a lot of people may not or know how to do it. And I'm trying to appreciate that some of you may be like, that's not easy for me to do in real time. So when I say we need to get better at it, that may not be helpful. You may be like, well, I want to get better. I don't know how. And I don't know what to tell you. So I have no idea what to tell you. I think it's fun. And I think some people are like, that's not fun at all. And I hate thinking like that on the fly. I'm trying to appreciate that. It's not that easy for everybody. Other questions about ministry or life or lost people? Questions about the thing we talked about today? I like session 4, if you couldn't tell. It's a fun one. Session 5 is fun too. Yes.
Man, I'm gonna butcher this. I think Nick was he was teaching us in one of the systematic classes, the institute classes. Something about the idea of like us being separated from the tree and therefore we find death or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Versus kind of like generational sin, maybe. That's all I got. You
Okay.
know what I'm talking about?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
He was saying like the tree of life is what we got to eat, and that's what gave us eternal life.
Mhm.
And so when we were basically screwed is when we couldn't
Eat from that?
tree
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, so there are some that would say, were we made, and this is a big question for how did Jews conceive of this?
Yeah.
I think that some Jews would have said, we were made immortal, and then death was an alien invasion that happened after we sinned. Others would say, no, we were made with the capacity for death. Always. We were just given access to the tree. So death happened not because we were never supposed to die or couldn't die, but because we were barred, if that makes sense. So I tend to go with the second option. I think that's how I see but I wouldn't die on that hill. And that it would probably be the minority view.
The one of we have the capacity for death.
Yeah.
How new is that, like, coming up in scholarship and academics, like that thought?
It's mostly, you have to do a lot of work on reading how, I keep saying Second Temple period, Second Temple Jews. Those are Jews from the rebuilding of the temple. Remember, you rebuild, Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah, till the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. We sometimes call those the silent years, but there's tons being written. And that gives you a flavor of how Jews think, because that's where Jesus and Paul are. They're in that period. So you have to read all of that and make sense of it there. And there are scholars that do that work. In reading it, it seems like that'd be the minority view. So, Other questions? Yes.
I heard probably from Nick that you have read some of the books.
Me. Okay, me. Yes.
You have read some of the books that weren't put in the Bible, and how was that helpful or?
Very helpful. Yeah.
So you would suggest doing that too?
Yeah. As much. Oh man, it's so good. Like, it's so good. Let me give you a for instance. This is probably what he has in mind, because he was asking. We had lunch 2 weeks ago, and we got to talk about this. And I talked for a bit, and that's probably what he's making fun of a little bit. He's not making fun of, but I think he thought it was cool. So, 'cause I think it's cool. So, 4th Maccabees, for example, is a Second Temple text, not included in our Bibles. It is in like the Slavic Bible, Slavonic. How do you call that? The Russian Bible. Yeah. It is in theirs. I think 4th Maccabees. It's about 18 chapters long, 18 or 19 chapters. The first 2 chapters talk about how the Jewish philosophy is better than the Greek philosophy, because it can produce, we might say, resolute living. Then the next, 16 chapters, are all about a family. So a dad, then his 7 sons, then the wife being slowly tortured to death by the Greeks. And they torture them, and they're going into detail about how they're torturing them. And they keep offering them, if you would just eat this pork, which was a food they were not allowed to eat, right? Just eat the pork and we'll stop. Just eat the pork and we'll stop. If y'all seen Silence, then it's a lot like that movie Silence with Scorsese. Just eat this pork and we'll stop. That movie, I can't watch that movie.
I really want to see it. I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's horrible. Horrible. You can't stomach it. It hurts to watch it. I will never rewatch it, but I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah.
So just eat this pork and we'll stop killing you. And they're going into detail. The mom finally just jumps into this. They had this giant fire they had built to burn them all, and she just jumps into it. Eat the pork. So that's a Second Temple text that Jews are reading, that Jews are aware of. They have several accounts of these martyrs and their defiance. What is that text communicating? The ritual food restrictions that we have. The ritual restrictions is not a good sentence. The food restrictions that we have, they matter to us because it shows our loyalty to Yahweh. Think about Daniel in Daniel chapter 1, right? He won't eat the king's food. And they are willing to die over this. Then let that just be background material. When you get to the New Testament and you just have Jesus show up on the scene and start saying, no, you can eat the food. And then it says, Mark will make a little comment, thus Jesus declared all foods clean. If you're a Jew reading that, you're going, we died for this. We will not. So then as Paul's going around these cities, you have Jews going, you can't say that. And then they're having councils like the Jerusalem Council over things like this. Because this is something they died for generations. And here comes Jesus going, that does not mark your loyalty to Yahweh now. You're keeping the kosher law. What does mark you? Loyalty to me. Regardless of circumcision or dietary law. It's not canon. It's not part of the scripture. But that helps me to make sense of the culture and how they think and all of that. And so, yeah, I think it's really important. Like, y'all should all read 1st and 2nd Maccabees and Tobit and Judith and the additions to Daniel, which are like Bel and the Dragon, some other things. Y'all should read those. And you don't have to read them and go, oh no, what do I do with my Bible now? It just gives you more the way people think. I have had to read all of them, like everything, and it's not that fun always, but it is interesting. So that's a really good example of something I would say that helps make sense of how New Testament people think. Yes.
This is kind of theoretical.
But is that cool though?
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool, right? And there's a bunch of them, like hundreds of those.
Just kind of like a follow-up question. It's kind of, I don't know, it's theoretical, but not that far off of real life. So let's say you're having a conversation with a person who may have formerly have been Christian, now is living like an atheist lifestyle, but has done some of like the work to read those extra documents, and they've kind of built some barriers because of reading some of that stuff. They're like, this is terrible. Like, it's not a life I want to live. Like, have you found, because of you being like a Bible scholar and believing like in the Lord and like seeing His work and like have tasted and seen His goodness, like those books are helpful for you? But also, is there, I don't know, are there like some dangerous places or texts where you read and you're like, oh, this could like make a bigger hang up for someone than reading the normal scripture?
You're asking me, and those things don't bother me, but I could see it bothering if there was somebody who was like, who was real sensitive to, especially issues around, like much talked about last week with the canon, and they read something that sounded Jewish, but it wasn't in the Bible, and that made them feel weird. Or they, like when the Da Vinci Code came out, they freaked out about the Gospel of Thomas. They're like, oh my gosh, I just can't trust the Bible now. I probably wouldn't have read it. But I think that a lot of those people have I don't want to say it, I made it stronger than I'll say it stronger than I mean it. I think several of those people have maybe an immature view of the canon and how we got the Bible and what the Bible's trying to do. But if they did, I wouldn't tell them to read it. Like I wouldn't have my 8th graders go read 4th Maccabees. Yeah. I have them read the Bible and like the Gospels, because most people aren't doing that. Yeah, most people aren't doing that. So I just take that for now. But y'all are asking if you should read them. Yeah, I don't have to read them. It helps, especially like 1st and 2nd Maccabees help a lot, because that's all about the Maccabean revolt from the 160s. And where we get Hanukkah. That's what 1st, 2nd Maccabees about. And it just gives you a backdrop of some of the Jewish expectation and what are they thinking with the Messiah and all that. Dead Sea Scrolls. So when Out of Curiosity reboots, that'll be one of our first episodes, I think. It'll be what are the Dead Sea Scrolls and what are they about and all that stuff. So kind of cool. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments?
Besides freaking out about the telescope.
He didn't watch that. I tried to get him to watch the news story on it, and he didn't care because he's really into sports right now. Really into sports. But he finished Harry Potter quickly, all of them. Oh, wow. Now he read in one day, he read 130 pages of the first Percy Jackson. Oh, so he's ripping through those things. And so he's both in that world, but then all he wants to do is, like, he's finding like, it'll be like San Jose State versus North Dakota State football, or like women's basketball. He's like, Dad, who's going to win? I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't want to know. He's like, I think this team's going to win by this much. I'm like, cool, whatever. And he's finding them on YouTube and watching their YouTube TV and watching this. He's obsessed with sports right now. So he's a weird little guy. One day he'll watch this and be like, my daddy said that
all the time. Science Titus is a good.
But he'll also ask about like black holes. So he's strange. I don't know where he gets it from Sarah. I will pray. If you have any other thoughts or questions, come find me. Or we can go have coffee. So, well, Father, there's some really profound things that our culture actually is begging for, that we see that are in this text and that are ancient, and they have direct import to our identity and who we are and our purpose and why we're here and our destiny. And so we thank you, even as you look at what's behind on the board right now, that in our brokenness and the dead, ugly trees that we make of our life, of the mess we've made of this world, the guilty nature that we have, the sinful nature and the stupid things we've all done, that you didn't leave us there, and you went and rescued us at great cost to you. And that's that's a testimony to your desire to love us and to give us life. And so the story of the Bible is an amazing story, Father, that points to you and your love and your glory. And we're just amazed that we get to be caught up in it. So help us to not take that for granted today. Help us to impress that upon the students and the leaders that we serve here, and just to care and love you more. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you.
Next week, session 5. I'll be here next week. Now you get that? But next week I'm in Kansas City, then you get rolling with 2. So 5, then 2, then 3, then 6, then 7. Wait. I think he wants me to teach the last one, so I think it's 8, then 6, then 7. It's gonna be weird. Yeah, it's gonna be weird. It's out of order. It's out of order.
I hardly know how to answer.